The stars looked different from the bridge of the UES Harmony. Ambassador Richard Kane stood at the large window, watching the distant lights of the neutral space station grow larger. His gray hair reflected the soft blue glow of the control panels behind him. At 55 years old, Kane had spent 30 years solving problems between different alien species. This mission felt different, though. More dangerous. "Sir, we will arrive at the station in 2 hours," Captain John Hayes reported from his position near the weapons console. Hayes was a big man with strong hands and careful eyes. He had been protecting diplomats for 8 years, but Kane could see worry on his face. "Thank you, Captain," Kane replied, turning away from the window. He walked to the main table where his team was working. Dr. Lisa Monroe looked up from her datapad. She was a small woman with dark hair and quick fingers that never stopped moving. When she was thinking, "The Zephyrians arrived 3 hours ago," she said. "Their ship is huge, much bigger than ours. They brought a full military escort." Kane nodded. The Zephyrians always brought too many weapons to peace talks. It was their way of showing power. They were tall, reptile-like creatures with green scales and sharp teeth. Their leader, Emperor Vexstar, ruled millions of worlds with an iron fist. He believed that strength came from fear. "What about the Altarians?" Kane asked. Amy Fletcher, the communications officer, answered without looking up from her screens. "They sent only one small ship, no weapons, just like always." Amy was young, maybe 25, with blonde hair and bright eyes. She spoke 12 different alien languages and could translate faster than most computers. Kane smiled slightly. The Altarians were the opposite of the Zephyrians in every way. They looked like floating clouds of light that could take solid form when they wanted. They loved art and music and poetry. They had never started a war in their entire history. But they controlled the quantum crystals that made faster-than-light travel possible. "This trade agreement has to work," Kane said to his team. "The Zephyrians have weapon technology that could help protect peaceful worlds. The Altarians have the crystals that everyone needs for space travel. If we can get them to trade fairly, everyone wins." Dr. Monroe looked worried. The cultural differences are huge, sir. The Zephyrians think the Altarians are weak because they avoid conflict. The Altarians think the Zephyrians are savages because they solve problems with violence. "That's why we're here," Kane said. "Humans are good at finding the middle ground. We understand both sides." Captain Hayes moved closer to the group. "Sir, I've been reading the security reports. There's been unusual Zephyrian military activity near their border. More ships than normal," Kane frowned. "Are you worried about an attack?" "Not here," Hayes said. "This is neutral space. But something is making them nervous. My security team will stay alert." The next 2 hours passed quickly. Kane reviewed his notes about both species while Dr. Monroe studied their cultural practices. Amy Fletcher tested the translation equipment that would let all 3 species understand each other during the talks. When they reached the station, Kane was impressed by its size. The station was built specifically for diplomatic meetings. It had sections designed for different types of aliens. The Zephyrian section had high temperatures and red lighting. The Altarian section was cool and filled with soft music. The human section was in the middle, comfortable for everyone. "Incoming message from the Zephyrian delegation," Amy reported. "Put it on screen," Kane ordered. The face of Commander Sektar appeared on the main display. He was a typical Zephyrian, with dark green scales and yellow eyes. 2 rows of sharp teeth showed when he spoke. "Ambassador Kane," the Zephyrian said in his deep voice. "The Emperor sends his greetings. We are ready to begin negotiations." "Thank you, Commander," Kane replied. "We look forward to working with you." The screen went dark, and Amy immediately put through another call. This time, a gentle voice filled the room like music. "Ambassador Kane, this is Harmonious Dawn of the Altarian delegation. We are grateful for your assistance in these talks. We hope to find peace and mutual benefit." "The pleasure is ours," Kane said. "We believe this agreement can help both your peoples." After the calls ended, Kane gathered his team one more time. Remember, we're not just negotiating a trade deal. We're trying to prevent a war. The Zephyrians have been expanding their territory. If they can't get the crystals they need through trade, they might try to take them by force. Dr. Monroe nodded. The Altarians are scared. They've never had to defend themselves before. They're depending on us to keep them safe. We won't let them down, Kane promised. The team moved to the transport bay where a small shuttle waited to take them to the station. As they flew across the gap between the ship and the station, Kane looked out at the three vessels floating in space. The human ship was medium-sized and practical. The Altarian ship was small and beautiful, covered in patterns that looked like artwork. The Zephyrian ship was enormous and covered in weapon systems. Those ships tell the whole story, Kane said. Quietly, one species that creates beauty, one that creates weapons, and us in the middle trying to help them understand each other. When they docked at the station, Kane felt the familiar excitement that came with a new diplomatic challenge. He had solved harder problems before. Species that had been fighting for centuries had made peace because of human diplomats. This would be another success story. The station's administrator, a friendly alien with 4 arms and purple skin, greeted them at the airlock. "Welcome, Ambassador Kane. The meeting room is ready." Both delegations are already here. Kane straightened his formal diplomatic jacket and checked his appearance one last time. In a few minutes, he would walk into a room with 2 species that barely trusted each other. His job was to find a way to make them partners instead of enemies. "Let's go make some peace," he said to his team. None of them knew that in 3 days, everything would change forever. The meeting room was filled with the soft hum of translation devices. Ambassador Kane sat at the round table between the 2 alien delegations. To his right, Commander Sektar represented the Zephyrian Empire. The large reptilian creature kept his clawed hands folded on the table, but his yellow eyes never stopped moving. To Kane's left, 3 Altarian delegates floated in their chairs like gentle clouds of blue light. "The quantum crystal production can increase by 30%, Harmonious Dawn said through the translator. Her voice sounded like wind chimes. "In exchange, we need defensive technology. Not weapons, just shields to protect our worlds." "Commander." Sektar's scales shifted to a darker green. "The Zephyrian Empire does not give away military secrets. We need exclusive trading rights for the crystals." Kane held up his hand. "Commander, exclusive rights would hurt other species that also need the crystals? Perhaps we can discuss a preferred trading status instead." For 3 days the talks continued like this. Kane and his team worked 18 hours each day, finding small compromises that brought the 2 sides closer together. Dr. Monroe helped explain cultural differences. Amy Fletcher made sure every word was translated correctly. Captain Hayes kept watch from the security station. On the morning of the 4th day, something changed. Kane was reviewing the latest proposal when Amy burst into his quarters. "Sir, there's a problem," she said, her face pale. "Long-range sensors are picking up a massive fleet approaching. Zephyrian ships, hundreds of them." Kane grabbed his jacket and ran to the communications center. The screen showed dozens of red dots moving toward the station. "Get me Commander Sektar," Kane ordered. When the Zephyrian appeared on screen, Kane noticed something different about his expression. The alien looked nervous, almost afraid. "Commander, our sensors show a large fleet approaching. What can you tell me about this?" Sektar's tongue flicked out quickly. I do not know, Ambassador. The Emperor sent only my ship." Before Kane could respond, the screens lit up with new contacts. The fleet was huge, bigger than anything Kane had ever seen. At the center was a ship that looked like a floating city. "Incoming transmission," Amy reported. A new Zephyrian face appeared on the screen. This one was younger than Commander Sektar, with brighter scales and cruel eyes. Golden decorations covered his uniform. "I am Prince Drakver, son of Emperor." "Vexstar," the newcomer announced. "I am taking command of these negotiations." Commander Sektar stood up quickly. "Prince Drakver, your father did not authorize this." "The talks are going well. The prince's laugh was like breaking glass. My father has grown weak. He wastes time with words when action is needed. The age of diplomacy is over. Kane felt a cold fear growing in his stomach. Prince Drakvar, these are official negotiations under galactic law. You cannot simply take over. Watch me, the prince said. The screen went dark. 20 minutes later, the prince's soldiers marched into the meeting room. They were larger than Commander Sektar, wearing black armor and carrying plasma weapons. The prince walked behind them, his golden decorations catching the light. All negotiations are ended, Prince Drakvar announced. The Zephyrian Empire will take what it needs. Harmonious Dawn's light flickered with fear. Ambassador Kane, what is happening? Kane stood up. Prince Drakvar, you are violating every treaty and law that governs this station. I demand that you leave immediately. The prince walked closer to Kane. You demand? What will you do if I refuse, human? Write a strongly worded letter? Kane's hands clenched into fists. The consequences of breaking galactic law are severe. You're making a mistake. The only mistake was listening to diplomats, the prince said. He turned to his soldiers. Kill the Altarians. No, Kane shouted, but it was too late. The soldiers raised their weapons. Plasma bolts filled the air with deadly light. Harmonious Dawn reached toward Kane with a glowing appendage, her musical voice crying out in pain and terror. The light that was her body flickered and went dark. The other Altarian delegates tried to flee, but the soldiers were faster. In 30 seconds, all three of the peaceful beings were dead. Their bodies lay on the floor like broken stars. Kane stared at the bodies, his mind unable to process what had just happened. Dr. Monroe screamed and ran toward the fallen Altarians. A soldier struck her with the butt of his weapon, and she fell hard, blood flowing from her head. Lisa! Kane shouted, dropping to his knees beside her. She was breathing, but her eyes were closed and her pulse was weak. Captain Hayes and his security team burst through the door, weapons drawn. Drop your weapons! Hayes commanded. The Zephyrian soldiers turned their guns on the humans. A firefight erupted in the meeting room. Hayes and his men fought bravely, but they were outnumbered 10-1. One by one, the human security officers fell. Amy Fletcher was at her communications station, her fingers flying over the controls. Mayday, this is the Use Harmony. We are under attack at neutral station Kepler 442b. The Zephyrians have killed the Altarian delegation. A soldier's plasma bolt destroyed her equipment. Amy kept transmitting on her backup system until another bolt sent her sprawling across the floor. Prince Drakvar watched the violence with satisfaction. Bring me the human ambassador, he ordered. Two soldiers grabbed Kane's arms and dragged him to his feet. The prince stood close enough that Kane could smell his reptilian breath. You wanted to see diplomacy at work, the prince said. Let me show you what real power looks like. He activated a wall screen that showed the space around the station. The Zephyrian fleet was moving away, but not back toward their own territory. They were heading toward the Altarian home system. Your precious peace treaty is dead, the prince said. My fleet will reach the Altarian homeworld in 6 hours. 2 billion of those weak creatures will join their delegates in death. Kane watched in horror as the ships disappeared into faster-than-light travel. You're insane. The entire galaxy will turn against you. The galaxy will learn to fear us, the prince replied. Starting with you. The soldiers dragged Kane toward the detention center. As they passed through the corridors, he saw more bodies, station personnel who had tried to help. Altarian civilians who had been visiting the station, all dead. In the detention center. Kane was thrown into a cell with his surviving team members. Dr. Monroe was unconscious, her head wrapped in bloody bandages. Amy Fletcher held her broken arm against her chest. Captain Hayes had a plasma burn across his shoulder, but his eyes were still alert. Sir, Hayes whispered. The backup transmitter in my gear. Amy's message got through to the monitoring station at Alpha Centauri. They know what happened. Kane stared at the ceiling of his cell. For 30 years he had believed that problems could be solved with words, that understanding and compromise could prevent war. He had been wrong. The diplomat who had entered this station 3 days ago was gone. The man who remained had watched innocent beings die because he had failed to protect them. He had seen evil triumph while good people suffered. Something cold and hard settled in Kane's chest. It felt like ice, but it burned like fire. For the first time in his life, Richard Kane understood what fury really meant. Outside the cell, Prince Drakvar was celebrating his victory. He had no idea that he had just awakened something terrible, something that would hunt him across the galaxy until justice was served. The human diplomat was dead. What remained was something far more dangerous. The detention center was cold and dark. Kane sat on the metal floor next to Dr. Monroe, checking her pulse every few minutes. Her breathing was steady but shallow. The bandages around her head were stained with blood, but the bleeding had stopped. "How is she?" Amy Fletcher asked from the corner. She had managed to make a sling for her broken arm using strips torn from her uniform. "She live," Kane said quietly, "but she needs real medical attention soon." Captain Hayes stood at the cell door, watching the corridor. His plasma burn looked painful, but he ignored it. "Sir, we need to talk about what happens next." Kane looked up at his security chief. "What do you mean?" Hayes moved closer and lowered his voice. "The backup transmitter worked. Earth knows what happened here. They know about the massacre and that we're prisoners." "Good," Kane said. "Help is coming." Hayes shook his head. "Sir, with respect, you don't understand. Earth won't send a rescue mission. They'll send a war fleet." Amy looked confused. "But we're diplomats. The government will negotiate for our release." "No," Hayes said firmly. "Not after what the prince did. Not after he killed innocent beings under a peace flag. The diplomatic corps is finished. Earth will respond with military force." Kane felt something shift inside his chest. The cold fury that had been growing since the massacre suddenly became clearer. "How long do we have?" 3 days, maybe 4, Hayes replied. "The nearest battle group is at Proxima Station. Admiral King commands it." "Robert King," Kane said, remembering. "The name? He commanded the assault on the Rigel pirates 10 years ago." "Yes, sir. He doesn't negotiate. He destroys enemies and asks questions later." Kane stood up and walked to the cell door. Through the bars, he could see Zephyrian guards at the end of the corridor. They were laughing about something, probably. "The massacre." The sound made Kane's hands shake with anger. "They think they've won," Kane said. "They think humans are weak because we prefer diplomacy to war. They're about to learn different," Hayes said. Kane turned back to his team. "We're not waiting for rescue. We're getting out of here ourselves." Amy looked surprised. "How?" "The guards have plasma weapons. The doors are electronically locked." "Because I know something about Prince Drakvar that he doesn't know I know." Kane said, "Dr. Monroe told me before the meeting. The prince has enemies in his own military." Commander Sektar was one of them. Hayes nodded slowly. The commander looked scared when the prince arrived, like he knew something bad was going to happen. "Exactly," Kane said. "The prince staged a coup against his own father. That means some Zephyrian officers are loyal to the old emperor. We can use that." Kane moved to the small ventilation grate near the ceiling. It was barely large enough for a human to crawl through. "Amy, can you fix the communication system if we get to the control room?" "Maybe," she said. "If the prince's soldiers didn't destroy everything." "Hayes, how many of your security people are still alive?" "4, sir. They're in the cell block down the hall. All wounded but mobile." Kane felt his diplomatic training taking over, but with a new purpose. Instead of finding compromise, he was planning an attack. "Here's what we're going to do. We get to the control room. Amy fixes the communications. We contact the Zephyrian officers who are loyal to the old emperor. We turn them against the prince. And then?" Hayes asked. "Then we take control of this station and wait for Admiral King to arrive," Kane said. "When he gets here, we don't just want to be rescued. We want to hand him intelligence about every Zephyrian military installation, every ship position, every weakness in their defenses." Amy stared at him. "Sir, you're talking about starting a war." Kane's eyes were cold. "The prince started the war when he murdered innocent beings. We're going to finish it." For the next hour, Kane and his team planned their escape. Hayes knew the station's layout from the security briefings. Amy understood the communication systems. Even Dr. Monroe, drifting in and out of consciousness, provided useful information about Zephyrian military culture. The plan was simple but dangerous. They would wait until the night shift changed guards. Hayes would create a distraction while Kane and Amy crawled through the ventilation system to the control room. Once they had communications, they would contact the Zephyrian officers who opposed the prince. The key is Commander Sektar, Kane said. He's been humiliated by the prince. His honor demands revenge. Zephyrians understand honor, Dr. Monroe whispered weakly. Use that against them. As they waited for the right moment, Kane found himself thinking about the Altarian delegates. Harmonious Dawn had trusted him to keep her people safe. He had failed. The memory of her dying light made the fury in his chest burn brighter. Sir, Amy said quietly, what if this doesn't work? What if we can't escape? Kane looked at her. Then, we die trying, but we don't die as helpless prisoners. We die fighting back. Hayes smiled grimly. I like this version of you better, sir. The guard change happened at midnight station time. Through the bars, they could see the new guards taking their positions. These soldiers looked tired and bored. Perfect. Remember, Kane whispered, we're not diplomats anymore. We're soldiers. Act like it. Hayes moved to the front of the cell and started shouting about Dr. Monroe's medical condition. The guards came, running, unlocking the cell door to check on the injured woman. While they were distracted, Kane and Amy slipped through the ventilation grate. Crawling through the narrow metal tunnel, Kane felt like a different person. The careful, patient diplomat was gone. In his place was someone harder, angrier, and completely focused on revenge. They reached the control room 20 minutes later. Amy went to work on the communication system while Kane watched the corridors. Her fingers moved quickly over the damaged controls, rerouting power and bypassing destroyed circuits. Got it, she whispered. Limited range, but I can reach the Zephyrian command ship. Kane took the microphone. Commander Sektar, this is Ambassador Kane. We need to talk. There was a long pause. Then the commander's voice came through the speakers, sounding tired and ashamed. Ambassador, I am sorry for what happened. The prince has dishonored us all. Then help us stop him, Kane said. Help us save your people. From the war that's coming? Another pause. What war? Kane smiled, but it was not a friendly expression. The one that starts when the human battle fleet arrives. The one that ends with your empire in ruins unless you help us prevent it. I will consider your words. Don't take too long, Kane said. Admiral King doesn't believe in second chances. The communication ended. Kane and Amy waited in the dark control room, listening to the sounds of the station around them. Somewhere, in the distance, they could hear Prince Dragvar's soldiers celebrating their victory. They had no idea that the human diplomat they had defeated was becoming something much more dangerous. Something that would hunt them across the galaxy until justice was served. The fury had awakened. And it was just getting started. The message from Alpha Centauri Monitoring Station reached Earth in 18 hours. President Sarah Adams was having breakfast in her office when the emergency alert came through. She read the report twice, her coffee growing cold as the words sank in. Get me the Defense Council, she told her assistant. Emergency session, now. 20 minutes later, the most powerful military leaders in human space sat around the conference table. Admiral Robert King appeared on the main screen from his flagship at Proxima Station. General Patricia Cole, the Army's top strategist, sat across from Fleet Admiral Nancy Ross. The Zephyrians have crossed a line, President Adams said, her voice steady but her eyes showing barely controlled anger. They murdered innocent beings under a peace flag. They took our diplomats prisoner. They have attacked the Altarian homeworld. Admiral King leaned forward on the screen. Madam President, my battle group can reach the station in 4 days. We'll get our people back. It's not enough, General Cole said. This isn't a rescue mission anymore. This is about showing the Galaxy, what happens when you betray human trust? Fleet Admiral Ross opened a data pad. Our intelligence report suggests the Zephyrians have over 2,000 ships in their military. Our active fleet has 800 vessels. President Adams stood up. Then we activate the reserve fleets, all of them. The room went quiet. Admiral King's image flickered as he processed the order. Madam President, that's every military vessel? We have ships that haven't seen combat in 50 years. The Zephyrians wanted to see what humans are really capable of, Adams said. They're about to find out. General Cole smiled grimly. Operation Righteous Fury is ready to implement. We've been planning for this scenario for 20 years. Admiral Ross looked confused. What scenario? The one where a major power attacks. Our diplomats, Cole explained. The one where we show the galaxy that human patience has limits. President Adams walked to the window overlooking the capital city. Admiral King, how long to mobilize the full fleet? 72 hours, King replied. But ma'am, some of those ships are museum pieces. They're not designed for modern combat. They don't need to be, Adams said. They just need to carry weapons and show the galaxy that we're serious. Meanwhile, at the neutral station, Kane and his team had been working for 6 hours. Amy Fletcher had restored most of the communication systems. Captain Hayes had freed his security team and armed them with captured Zephyrian weapons. Dr. Monroe was awake and helping to coordinate their operations. Commander Sektar is willing to help, Kane reported to his team. He's been in contact with other officers who oppose the prince. They're planning their own rebellion. Hayes checked his weapon. How many ships do they control? About 40% of the fleet, Kane said. The rest are loyal to the prince or too scared to act. Amy looked up from her console. Sir, I'm picking up massive energy signatures. Something big is coming out of hyperspace. The main screen activated, showing the space around the station. Dozens of ships appeared, dropping out of faster-than-light travel. They were human vessels, but not the usual diplomatic or exploration ships. These were warships, painted black and covered in weapon systems. This is Admiral King aboard the UES Vengeance, a voice announced over the communication system. Prince Drakvar, you have 10 minutes to surrender our people and submit to galactic justice. Kane felt a surge of pride as he watched the human fleet take defensive positions around the station. The ships moved with deadly precision, each one knowing exactly where to go and what to do. Prince Drakvar's response came quickly. Admiral King, you are outnumbered. My fleet has 500 ships. You have less than 50. Count again, King replied calmly. More ships appeared from hyperspace, hundreds of them. Some were new vessels that gleamed like silver knives. Others were older ships that had been pulled from storage and refitted for war. All of them carried the same message. Humanity was done being patient. Kane activated the communication system. Admiral King, this is Ambassador Kane. We have control of the station's communication center. I have intelligence about Zephyrian fleet positions and internal conflicts within their command structure. Good to hear your voice, Ambassador, King replied. Are you and your team secure? We're fighting our way to freedom, Kane said. The Zephyrians are about to discover that diplomats can be warriors when necessary. On the bridge of his command ship, Prince Drakvar was beginning to understand his mistake. The human fleet now numbered over 300 vessels. More ships were arriving every hour. His advantage was disappearing. Sir, his tactical officer reported, the humans are jamming our communications. Our ships can't coordinate properly. And sir, another officer added nervously, Commander Sektar's ship has gone dark. We can't contact him. The prince's eyes narrowed. Sektar is a traitor. Send a squadron to destroy his ship. Sir, we can't. The humans are protecting him. Prince Drakvar stared at the tactical display. Human ships were positioned between his loyal forces and the rebels. The humans weren't just rescuing their diplomat. They were supporting a civil war within the Zephyrian Empire. General Cole's voice came over the communication system from Earth. Prince Drakvar, you wanted to end the age of diplomacy. Congratulations, you've succeeded. The age of human fury has begun. On the station, Kane and his team fought their way through the corridors. The Zephyrian guards were confused and scared. Their fleet was being surrounded by human warships. Their own officers were rebelling. The easy victory they had celebrated was turning into a nightmare. "The detention center is clear," Hayes reported. "All human personnel are free." Kane looked at his team. Dr. Monroe was pale but determined. Amy Fletcher worked with her broken arm, maintaining communications with the human fleet. Captain Hayes and his security officers moved like the soldiers. They had always been. "Sir," Amy said, "Admiral King is requesting permission to begin the assault." Kane thought about Harmonious Dawn and the other Altarian delegates. He thought about the billions of innocent beings who had died when the Zephyrian fleet attacked the Altarian homeworld. He thought about the prince's cruel laughter as he ordered the massacre. "Tell the Admiral that Ambassador Kane recommends immediate action," he said. "The diplomatic mission is over. Military operations may begin," Amy transmitted the message. Across the human fleet, weapon systems powered up. The ships that had once carried explorers and scientists now carried instruments of war. The species that had brought peace to the galaxy was about to remind everyone why they had been feared as warriors first. Prince Drakvar had wanted to see what humans were really capable of. He was about to find out that human diplomacy had never been weakness, it had been mercy. And mercy, once withdrawn, revealed the true power underneath. The battle for the station was about to begin. But the real war, the one that would reshape the galaxy, was just starting. The battle began at exactly 14:30 station time. Admiral King's fleet moved like a machine designed for one purpose: destroying enemies. The human ships spread out in perfect formation, each one knowing its target and mission. Prince Drakvar watched from his command ship as human weapons turned his mighty fleet into scrap metal. The humans didn't just attack randomly. Every shot was planned, every movement had a purpose. They were dismantling his empire piece by piece. "How are they doing this?" the prince demanded. "They're outnumbered." His tactical officer's voice shook with fear. "Sir, they're not fighting like we expected. They're using our own ships against us. Commander Sector S rebels are attacking our rear formations while the humans hit us from the front." On the station, Kane led his team through the corridors toward the prince's command center. They moved like ghosts, using maintenance tunnels and service shafts to avoid the main battles. Hayes and his security team had trained for situations like this, but Kane surprised them with his tactical knowledge. "Left corridor," Kane whispered. 3 guards around the corner. Hayes nodded and signaled his men. They moved forward with practiced silence. The Zephyrian guards never knew what hit them. "How did you know they were there?" Amy asked. "I studied the station blueprints for 3 days before we arrived," Kane replied. "I memorized every room, every passage, every system. That's what diplomats do. We prepare for everything." Dr. Monroe smiled weakly. "Except you're not preparing for diplomacy anymore." "No," Kane said, his eyes cold. "I'm preparing for justice." They reached the command center 20 minutes later. The massive room was filled with screens showing the battle outside. Prince Drakvar stood in the center, shouting orders at officers who looked more scared than loyal. Kane stepped into the room, holding a captured plasma rifle. "Prince Drakvar!" The prince spun around, his yellow eyes wide with surprise. "The human diplomat. How did you escape?" "I told you before," Kane said calmly. "You don't understand what humans are capable of." Around the room, Zephyrian officers reached for their weapons. Hayes and his team emerged from the shadows, their guns already trained on the enemy soldiers. "I wouldn't," Hayes said quietly. "We've been doing this a lot longer than you think." Prince Drakvar laughed, but the sound was nervous now. "You think you've won? My fleet still outnumbers yours?" Kane walked to the main tactical display. The screen showed the battle raging outside. Human ships were systematically destroying Zephyrian vessels while rebel forces attacked from within. It was beautiful and terrible to watch. "Your fleet is dying," Kane said. "Your officers are rebelling, your empire is falling apart. All because you thought humans were weak. We are warriors." The prince snarled. We have conquered 100 worlds. You conquered worlds full of peaceful beings who couldn't fight. Back, Kane replied. Today you learned the difference between conquest and war. Amy Fletcher worked at a nearby console, her broken arm forgotten. Sir, I'm broadcasting this conversation to every ship in both fleets. Everyone can hear what's happening. Kane nodded. Good, I want them to understand. He turned back to Prince Drakvar. You wanted to end the age of diplomacy. You succeeded, but you made one mistake. What mistake? You forgot that human diplomats exist because human warriors allow them to exist, Kane said. We choose peace because we know the cost of war. But when peace fails, we remember how to fight. On the screens around them, the battle was reaching its end. Human ships surrounded the remaining Zephyrian vessels. Many of the enemy ships were surrendering rather than face destruction. Admiral King to Ambassador Kane, a voice came over the communication system. Kane activated his microphone. Go ahead, Admiral. We've secured the area. The Zephyrian fleet is defeated. What are your orders regarding the prince? Kane looked at Prince Drakvar. The arrogant alien who had ordered the massacre now looked small and frightened. His golden decorations seemed foolish rather than impressive. The prince will face trial for his crimes, Kane said. War crimes, murder of innocent beings, violation of galactic law. You cannot judge me, the prince protested. I am royalty. You were royalty, Kane corrected. Now you're a war criminal. Dr. Monroe stepped forward, her medical training taking over despite her injuries. Ambassador, what about the Zephyrian civilians, the ones who had nothing to do with this? Kane's expression softened slightly. They'll be protected. This war was against the prince and his followers, not against innocent people. He turned to Commander Sektar, who had arrived with a group of rebel officers. Commander, your people need new leadership. Leadership that understands the value of peace. Sektar bowed his head. The rebellion against Prince Drakvar is complete. Emperor Vextar has been restored to power. He sends his apologies for his son's actions. Apologies don't bring back the dead, Kane said coldly, but they're a start. The next few hours passed. Quickly, Prince Drakvar was taken into custody by human forces. The remaining Zephyrian ships surrendered or joined the rebels. The station was secured. Kane stood in the observation deck, looking out at the human fleet. The ships that had arrived as instruments of war were now guardians of peace once again. But the galaxy would remember what they had seen. President Adams appeared on the communication screen. Ambassador Kane, the entire human government is proud of what you accomplished. We didn't accomplish anything, Kane replied. We just reminded. The galaxy-wide diplomacy works? How so? Kane turned away from the window. Because now everyone knows what happens when diplomacy fails. They've seen human fury unleashed. They understand that our patience has limits. Amy Fletcher was broadcasting the news of the victory to every corner of known space. The story would spread quickly. Humans had transformed from peaceful diplomats to unstoppable warriors in a matter of days. The species that brought peace to the galaxy had shown why that peace was so valuable. What happens now? Dr. Monroe asked. Kane looked at his team. Amy with her broken arm still working at her station. Hayes and his security officers standing guard. Dr. Monroe providing medical care despite her own injuries. They had all changed during this crisis, become something harder and more dangerous. Now we go back to being diplomats, Kane said. But the galaxy will remember what they saw. Here. They'll remember that human diplomacy isn't weakness. It's mercy. He paused, thinking about Harmonious Dawn and the other innocent beings who had died. And mercy, once withdrawn, reveals the fury underneath. The age of unquestioned human diplomacy was over. In its place was something new. Diplomacy backed by the certain knowledge that humans could wage war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Prince Drakvar had wanted to end the age of diplomacy. Instead, he had created something far more powerful. The age of respected peace. Maintained by the promise of unmatched fury, the galaxy would never again mistake human kindness for human weakness.